Hi, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Climate Convergence webinar, Stop the Site C Dam. We're just going to give it a few minutes while everyone trickles in this evening, but welcome. Hello, everyone. We are live here tonight from the unceded Coast Salish territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh people. I'm here to welcome you to the Climate Convergence webinar, Stop the Site C Dam, Why We Need to and How We Can. We have an incredible panel of speakers who have been in this fight since the very beginning, standing up against this attack on Indigenous rights and on really a piece of land in British Columbia that is invaluable to future generations. Before we begin tonight, I want to ask Kelly White, Coast Salish Elder, to please open our forum and discussion. Sorry, Kelly, you're muted. Not yet, Kelly. There's probably something popped up that said the host has asked you to unmute. Thank you, everyone, for your patience and for your comments in the chat. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Let us know where you're speaking from today.
Does Kelly know that it's the bottom left-hand side of her screen that has a little thing that looks like a little microphone with a slash through it, and she just needs to click on that and that will make her microphone live?
We'll see. Not yet. Okay, Kelly. So I'm going to go ahead and have you leave and come back, and we'll see if that works. So if you exit the meeting and then come on back with that same link, and I'll just give some introductory remarks when you figure that out.
I said we have 143 participants. That's awesome. Good work.
Yeah, everyone's still coming in, but we'll go ahead and get started while Kelly figures it out. I'm sure we will figure it out. Tonight's Climate Convergence webinar is part of a number of webinars that we've been organizing within this period of fighting for climate justice with the COVID-19 pandemic. As we exist here today in Canada and in countries around the world, we cannot ignore the fact that this pandemic is yet another sign that the planet is off balance, that the careful relationship between humanity and nature is being shooken at its very foundation, and that we have to do all that we can to reorient ourselves as humanity and this relationship. We wanted to start today, here we go, I think Kelly will be here, with a welcoming from Kelly White. And then, like I said, we'll go on to a fantastic panel of speakers and then a discussion. So I encourage everyone to think of questions, use the Q&A function in the middle, and I'll welcome again Kelly White. Kelly, I think we should hear you loud and clear now.
Hello, is there anybody in there?
We're here.
I must have wiggled my nose the wrong way or something. HOYLCM CIM. Chakwimentomi Kiachitin. In our Salish language, we're thankful and grateful to be in your aura. CIM, the great spirit within the Natsamat of CM. We're one. Our relatives in regard to Site C dam and the protection for sacred life. We take pity on those that millions that have given their life in the form of the lifespans of Site C in regard to the swimmers, the flyers, the crawlers of the earth, the four-legged, and us, and the people, how much we damage the sacredness of earth just by a flick of the switch for the power to be on, or the faucet, you know, the luxury of turning the faucet on rather than going to the spring and getting the water from the land. So disconnected that we are from where Miniwichoni, the water is at Site C. Palamea Ata Lila Wastelo. I'm thankful and grateful that the Miniwichoni, that the water brings us together, not Samat, as one. This evening, even though small precious time that we have and so much going on in our lives, I want to thank the spirit of all good that the people that are speaking this evening and those that are joining in, even if they just want to hear the speakers or company or however we're participating. I want to offer thanks to the Miniwichoni, the water of life at Site C Dam, through our Eagle song. The Salish are 7 dialects in BC before Columbus for some, British Columbia for others. I want to thank the Ililwat Nation is one of the dialects of our Salish peoples, and this is coming from the mountains. The Eagle song that was shared with us when they defended their territories of protesting the blockades coming through in the early 90s and the late 80s. And so the Lilwat Eagle song goes through thousands of years of ceremony And the songs are ceremony, not meant to be protest or used in a rage or anything governed by rage. So those that have rage in your hearts for justice for Site C, this is for your families. Those that have anger for what's going on around us, that we feel we need to do something, and those that are engaging this evening with us. We thank the gods that are within your heart, mind, and body journeys while we go around the world and back in this short amount of time with the blessings of knowledge that we have to share with one another to strengthen one another. And thinking of all the nations that are First Nation in the land where we come from, that's where we are not samad as one. So many wichoni pilamia, we thank the water of life. Bless yourselves. Think of the eagle soaring. These messages are the only one that can fly high is the eagle. And these messages this evening are flying high with the eagle. And we need the eagle to see our messages, because sometimes we can't carry our message on our own. So we thank all the nations that are standing up to protect the sacredness of life, the many nations that are on this panel this evening. We honor you. Whew, whew. We thank the eagle that flies higher than anyone else in the world, that carries and sees our messages. And we thank the eagle that carries the messages out of the hearts and the minds of the ones delivering their message this evening. And we thank those that are joining in the circle, our humble circle for Site C Dam. And it won't be the same when we're done with this few hours this evening. It's the will of the Creator. We make a better place by our thoughts, our mind, and our heart journey together, not samat as one. Haichkasiyam, Sitsot Siyayam, the suffering that we put on the sacred earth together. We thank you all for being here this evening to put a little doctoring on that we can all step forward together in a good manner. Haichkasiyam. I know you won't be the same after this panel this evening, so you stay with us now.
Thank you very much, Kelly White, for setting us right for the rest of our webinar here tonight. There are many people logged in from across British Columbia, from across the world, actually, from the United States all the way to Venezuela, for this discussion about Site C, which will go beyond Site C, and I think discuss really very important issues related to, like we said, our relationship with Mother Earth and our fight against climate change and for climate justice, which has become so acutely apparent at this time of pandemic. During the recent BC provincial election campaign period, there was a renewed attention also on the Site C mega dam construction project. Some of this is due to the hard work of some of the speakers we have tonight. And also more attention on its continued scandals, from violations of Indigenous rights, cover-ups of critical geological findings, billion-dollar cost overruns, and the destruction of rare prime agricultural land. There are so many reasons this project is a growing catastrophe for the environment and the people of British Columbia. Now that the election is over, we can't afford to lose and waste time to fight back against Site C. So that's why we're gathered here tonight, to collect our forces, to collect our thoughts and our hearts and our minds, and figure out a way forward together against this disastrous project. To start, before I invite up our speakers, I'll let you know who they all are, and then I'm going to play a short video. First of all, my name is Allison Bodine. I am an organizer with Climate Convergence here in Vancouver. I am a journalist, author, and researcher with a focus on environmental, Latin American, and immigration issues. Tonight's panel, we have Wendy Holm, Kin Boone, Rita Wong, and Thomas Davies to all speak about different aspects of the Site C Dam, of organizing against it. We're going to play a video now, which is a beautiful video showing what the Peace River Valley was and still is in some ways before the Site C Dam, and what it could be again.
Where'd you go? Hello?
So we'll go ahead and post a link to that in the chat too for people that want to share and watch that beautiful piece of the Peace River Valley, that beautiful piece of Turtle Island. Again, to start our speakers tonight, I want to invite Wendy Holm. She is an award-winning agrologist who was one of the people responsible for evaluating the agricultural impact of the assessment of the Site C Dam. Wendy Holm appeared as an expert witness before the Joint Federal Provincial Environmental Impact Assessment Review Board panel, and was also the editor of Damming the Peace, The Hidden Costs of the Site C Dam, which I would highly recommend and came out in 2018. So as Wendy is speaking, I'll share a few links, but I will give the floor to you now, Wendy. Thank you. You are also muted, but you.
Okay.
There we are.
Oh my goodness. Okay, whoops. Sorry, Allison. Click on the
That's okay.
slide. There we go.
You can see.
Okay. We there? That's your slide, actually. I just put this up as my first one. So
almost. We just need
here we go.
There we go. Yeah.
You see?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much, Allison and the organizers for this session. I'm going to bring you through some material that I have put together over the years and talk to you basically about food security issues of the Site C Dam. And I am speaking now. Why is this not wanting to advance? Are you hearing that little thunk? Well, okay, I just click it. So I'm speaking to you from Nachlelequim, which is really the sound of water rushing between the rocks at one of the fishing spots on beautiful Bowen Island. The Peace Valley, you've had a wonderful introduction to it. It is an absolutely unique piece of Canada. I've traced the river as it flows north into the Slave and Athabasca and up through and exiting into the Arctic Ocean. It is fed by the Parsnip and Finley river systems. And you can see the dam here going through. This is the BC Alberta border. So Site C is being constructed just about here. And a better close-up on that. This slide is old of the planned of the in process Site C Dam, and you can get the context with British Columbia from the map on the top. The Bennett Dam was the first dam to be built. The Peace Canyon Dam was the second, and Site C is the third and last dam planned for the river. In the words of Julian Napoleon, one of the most eloquent leaders in the First Nations community speaking on the peace, Site C is the largest cumulative violation of democracy in the colonial history of this country. There's two important books that, for those of you who want to know more about it, and these books came out within months of each other. The first book is Sarah Cox's Breaching the Peace. Sarah Cox is an award-winning journalist and spent a lot of time documenting all of the backstory behind how this travesty came to the point where it is today. And Damming the Peace brings together and scientists to document all of the hidden costs of the dam, what the costs will be as this goes forward. Oh, no. And as Alison mentioned, I was an expert witness before the Site C economic, before the joint federal provincial panel on Site C, and this is the beautiful land in the piece. The impact of the dam, the numbers, some of the stuff I put in this presentation so that you will have it afterwards so you can reference it. So it impacts a total of almost 32,000 acres. The rest of it is under great constraints with respect to stability and wave generated landslides, and basically removes the option for farming from that land pretty significantly. And of that flooded land, 16,000 acres, BC Hydro only valued 13% of the total land that is being impacted when they looked at their what will this cost to other sectors if we go ahead with this. So they greatly undervalued the I just thought this was fun to show to the panel. So if this is all of the land, this is the land that's flooded. They played some jiggery-pokery, and this is the land they measured. And that's the land they said that will be lost to the Site C dam. So it was a shell game of numbers from the beginning with BC Hydro, because they really didn't want to look at the impact of agriculture. All of the expert testimony that was put forward by on the net. This is the presentation I made to the panel, if anyone's interested in more detail on that. What really talking to you about today is food security. You know, climate change, with most of our product coming, fruits and vegetables from out of the province, from California and New Mexico. This was just a story came out just the other day about the depletion of the Ogallala aquifer. The security of our food systems is entirely dependent on how sustainable we can make our systems at home. The global forces pressuring food prices, climate change, global loss of farmland, water shortages, the salinization of soil through poor irrigation practices, higher energy costs, higher transportation costs, supply chain concentration, population growth, and of course now a global pandemic that has had dramatic impacts on supply chains. The Peace River Valley is absolutely unique land. It's some of the best land in Canada. It has this absolute combination, the marriage of alluvial soils. When I talk to people who don't understand agriculture, I say, well, if you were a vegetable, you'd pray your children grew up in alluvial soils, because they're the best soils for horticulture. They are fertile river bottom soils with deep drainage, and the alluvial soils and the class 1 climate that you get from a west to east running valley that brings in warm air from the Pacific is absolutely unique. And it gives this area a range of options equal to the Fraser and Okanagan valleys, but with higher yields because it is in the north, and so you get the long periods of daylight. And this is some pictures. I'm sure Ken will have others of some of the beautiful crops in the Peace Valley. As I said, all of the crops in the Fraser Valley, plus a great deal of good production of grain. I mean, people think it's so far north and they don't understand it, but it is absolutely unique biosystem up there. There's lots of energy sources. We're already paying way more for the Site C dam energy sources, but really only fruits and vegetables are fruits and vegetables. And this seems like a fairly obvious statement, but you know, fruits and vegetables are the building blocks of human nutrition. One of the greatest predictors of poor outcomes in later life is poverty in childhood. Why? Because poverty affects nutrition. BC already has the highest child poverty rate in Canada because of all the single moms on low incomes that are looking after their kids. And Canada's north is dramatically nutrition deficient. Certain I can't remember which one it was, but called basically the federal response to food security in the north as atrocious. The Peace Valley is much closer to Lower Mainland, is closer to Lower Mainland than California, and is of course way closer to Northwest Territories and Yukon than California. As Alison mentioned in the beginning, the alluvial soils, the class 1 climate, give it the capacity, if in full production, to meet the nutritional requirements of over 1 million people a year forever. And these are figures from BC Hydro's own work back in the 80s. So when you're talking about resilience, you know, when we're looking at how do we deal with shock, and we're certainly in a period of shock right now, we have to be able to bounce back, and this Foodlands Commons is a really, really important part of that. So how do we save this land? How do we, what could this, how could we go to a much better outcome for this valley? One of the things that really interests me is the idea of bringing together universities in BC, Alberta, Yukon, Northwest Territories, and creating an education cooperative where the land is held in a sustainable cooperative of these universities. We create a center of excellence in organic agriculture up there where PhD students and profs cycle through. They offer apprenticeship programs to students who are coming out of the universities who want to learn cutting edge, sustainable, organic production methods in a setting where they're surrounded by other young people who are wanting to do the same thing, and give them the opportunity to homestead post-grad into creating a cooperative in the piece for horticulture and other production, sustainable production. Food for today, but farmers for tomorrow. We don't really think about that. Where are our farmers coming from? Where are our young farmers going to come from? And that's a really important part of this whole dilemma. So I would in a New York minute love to put something like this together, and I'll bet within under 18 months we could have it really cooking. I want to mention a couple of things briefly because I wasn't sure how many others were going to be able to be speaking. Part of the concerns with the stem, they've got a long L design that's never been used. They had to put this design in place because they were trying to find bedrock. They never have found bedrock. The expression I like is the geographical equivalent of billiard balls, trying to build on the geographical equivalent of geological equivalent of billiard balls, because what you have is these shales and loams that slip against each other and offer no purchase at all. So they're trying a dam that's never been tested. World Bank would never fund a project that's never been tested, and it's never been independently evaluated. Earthfield dams and earthquakes and fracking, oh my. One of the people who writes in the book is Andrew Nikiforuk, and talks about this Site C dam is being built on the edge of the Moberly Field, and the Moberly Field aspires to be the biggest fracking field in North America. And this is right cheek and jowl next to this earth-filled dam with no footings. According to people who know a great deal about this, more than 1,000 earthquakes have been created by this fracking in the north. 12,000 fracking operations have triggered nearly, I can't see because nearly 40 earthquakes. This was a few years ago. And the world record for the largest tremor ever attributed to the technology of fracking was in Fort St. John. And of course, the dam is right smack in the middle of this. Another big impact is the Peace Athabasca Delta. This delta is a World Heritage Site. It's a tremendously important landform. And the drying of the Peace Athabasca Delta, 2/3 of it is due already to the dams that are on the Peace. And Site C will exacerbate this dramatically, and it will also block the passage of important fish species. Methylmercury is another important result of this dam. It's of course caused by the decomposition of organic matter that's normally sequestered and without oxygen, and this will stay in the food chain for 3 generations. And there are a great many people in the Canada's north that depend on fishing and wild food for their sustenance. And this will poison 3 generations of people depending on that. David Schindler, who writes in the book as well, talks about the tragic effects of methylmercury, and it's the same fight that's being fought in Muskrat Falls on the Churchill River as well. The other thing to point out, I think, is that what's happening in the Peace Valley, unless we stop it, will repeat itself across Canada. We have agreed to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050, and that is entirely dependent on dams, on hydroelectric dams, building the equivalent of 100 Site C dams. That doesn't mean 100 dams, it means by megawatt capacity, equivalent of 100 Site C dams in the next 32 years. And these dams are going to be, where are they going to be? They're going to be on river bottoms, they're going to be in valleys, they're going to be in important areas of Canada, and all of them would be, I'm sure, covered by Indigenous rights and treaties. So in closing, I want to give you my thinking on why this project has been so hard to stop. Because really, as an agrologist, I was, I mean, we found out, I think, a lot of important stuff, and it made no difference at all. They didn't even care. And that's why I put together the book, Damming the Peace, to try and bring out the issue of how many impacts this dam has that aren't being considered. And I was frustrated by the normally, with so many political downsides, a government turn around and say, okay, we've made a mistake and now we're going to do something different. But it's been very difficult. In my opinion, the end game of the Site C dam is all about water, specifically continental water sharing. It's interesting to note that the dams, in the 1950s, the US Army Corps of Engineers was asked by Washington, probably told by Washington, to make sure the US doesn't run out of water. And so they set upon mapping of North America's water resources under the auspices of NORAD. And when the dams were planned on the Columbia and the Peace in the late 1950s, NORAD was sitting cheek to jowl right next to the Canadian engineers in the planning of those dams. The FTA and the NAFTA and now the CUSMA define investor rights in water. Once you take water from its free-flowing state, where Mother Nature brought it, and do anything else to it, bottle it, impound it, extract it, pump it, spray it as snow. Once you do anything different than what Mother Nature had in mind for that water to happen without your intervention, then that water becomes a good, because you are intervening to do something different for that water to make it serve the needs of the person you're going to, however, distribute it to. So once you take water from its free-flowing state and you impound it, all the NAFTA rights apply. So these are 2 very interesting maps. When I wrote well, we'll come to that. I wrote a book called Water and Free Trade back in 1988, and I was doing a book tour, and I was going through Winnipeg, and the students at University of Winnipeg, their professor had them make up these maps because he found it really interesting. And so it's a 2-layer map. One of the map on the bottom is all the major river systems and dams, and the map on the top is all the diversion schemes that were these American engineering companies, about 7 of them or 9 of them, came up with after looking at the US Army Corps of Engineers maps, because the US Army Corps of Engineers said, okay guys, how do we figure this out? Where are we going to get this water? And these engineering firms came up with a whole bunch of different ideas. And the students mapped each engineering plan in a different color of marker. And every single one of them goes through the Peace River, because, and this is water from the north, this is water that will be drawn off from ocean outflows and held back and brought down. The reason the Peace is because right here is the Rockies. And the only way to get water east of the Rockies. The only way is to bring it through the Peace. I wonder if I can go back. Yes, I can. Good. And another very interesting thing, this is a close-up of that, of this obviously detail. And I want you to look very carefully at this little arrow. Can you see that? You see a little arrow there and a little arrow here, right? Remember that little arrow. Nope. What the Peace, as you recall, goes north. It flows into the Athabasca and the Slave and flows up through the Mackenzie and into the Arctic, right? It doesn't go south. This is the diversion point. And this is exactly where the Amisk Dam is being planned in Alberta. Exactly where the Amisk Dam is planned, because that's what will impound the water and allow a portion of it to flow south. Okay, and NAFTA seals the deal, but I don't think that anybody's going to be arguing about it, because the private sector who own the water are going to want to sell it, and the Americans are going to want to buy it. So that we don't even have any, even if we did, we don't have any real option. Jeffrey Sachs had an article in the Globe and Mail a little while ago that talked about how the untapped water resources in Canada are going to provide a major benefit to the Americans for clean green targets through Canadian hydroelectricity. I don't know if you remember the snakes and ladders game of when you were kids, but picture these as dams up in Canada, and picture what's sliding down is maybe some hydroelectricity, but there's also a lot of water in that scheme. I'm almost done. So these two books, remember those books, they both give a very good history of what's happened here. And I moved my pictures. I'm done, but I have to get to the end of my presentation there. Pause. Cancel. Oh my God. All of the MPs, all of the MLAs in Victoria have a copy of the book, because we gave it to them on almost Mother's Day in 2018. Every single member of the Legislative Assembly received a copy of Sarah's book and my book through the donation of 87 democracy warriors in British Columbia. Closing with Julian's words, which I opened, it is the largest cumulative violation of democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. That.
And it was 20 minutes.
Weird, the lovely stream of music. No, I think it's important. As I said tonight, we're going to be discussing the Site C Dam from all different aspects. And I think something that doesn't always click is the deep connection and the obvious connection between dams and water. And that this is fundamentally also about who's making the decisions about what's best to do with the water that is going to give us all life, and how is it that these decisions keep being made really without our input of Indigenous nations whose rights, who own the rights to the water, but also to people in British Columbia. So thank you for that perspective.
I meant to just add that Joyce Nelson, who is a celebrated Toronto journalist, wrote the chapter on water diversions in the book. So it's super well documented. Thanks.
And Thomas has just put the links to those two books in the chat. So I encourage people to check them out, to buy them, to gift them. And I'm also going to put a link right now to the recent province piece, your opinion piece, Wendy, there, which has a lot of important information and
pretty much everything I just said.
Yeah, it's all spelled out in the province. And then we'll go on to our next speaker. So now we're traveling away from Bowen Island and over to right to the Peace Valley, to Ken Boone. So Ken is and his wife Arlene live and farm at Bear Flat in the Peace River Valley between Hudson's Hope and Fort St. John. They've been deeply involved in the fight to stop the Site C Dam for many years and are both directors with the Peace Valley Environment Association, While most of their land has been expropriated for the project, so in the past tense, has been expropriated, for now they remain living in the old house that Arlene's grandfather built. It's a pleasure to have you here with us, Ken. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. And yeah, and I want to thank Climate Convergence for holding this webinar tonight. It's really appreciate that. I didn't put together any slides because I knew Arlene wasn't going to be here tonight, and she's the smarter half of this household, and I would probably just screw it up. So you're just going to have to listen to me, or not. Yeah, so Site C Dam, some history on it, and I think a lot of people know a lot of the history. It's been a long time in the works, or tentatively in the works. I was just thinking about this earlier today. A neighbor up the valley, well, she's 40 kilometers up the valley, Gwen Johansson, was telling us how in 1976 they were building her house on the Peace River. And as they were building the house, BC Hydro drove in and said, well, maybe that's not such a good idea because we're going to, you'll get flooded out from the Site C Dam. So she's still living in that house today. So that kind of gives you a sense of, how long this has been going on and how long it's had an impact on people's lives. And I guess as a side note to that, unfortunately, she has been expropriated now. She's still in the house. But the loggers just moved in, I believe, several days ago and are now clearing the trees in her part of the valley there and right next to her house. So and unfortunately, that's happening all through the valley right now. It's a big valley. They got years and years of clearing ahead of them, and it's not too late on that front. To stop Site C. Trees will grow back, nature will heal the valley. And that is a very important thing to note. But my God, they are really, the work has ramped up like on steroids in this valley right now. So I guess some update of where we are, and I'll try to keep that part brief. But I really thought this project, I think many of us thought this project would get killed in the environmental assessment process. It was a joint provincial and federal review done in 2013 and 14. And it had its challenges because it was under the newly amended Stephen Harper SIA Act of 2012. So it was the first major project reviewed under, the very much diminished Environmental Act that Stephen Harper brought in. But despite all of that, I thought that's where we had the biggest shot, and we did. I mean, the environmental impact statement for this project was 26,000 pages. So that just gives you an idea of the enormous impacts that happens when you flood 107 kilometers of river valley, and a very unique, like Wendy pointed out, it's a low elevation, river valley in the far north. Running west to east, which is also very unique because you end up with two totally different regions. The North Bank, where all the agriculture is, and that's where I am here, where we live. It all has a southern exposure, southern aspect. It gets full benefit of sunlight, long northerns, daylight, and then you have the South Bank, which is north facing. And in the case here, most of it was somewhat protected as part of the Peace Boudreaux protected area, and just an amazing chunk of country all along the south bank of the river. It was all basically wilderness country on that side, and well, still virtually is, except for where they're logging through the bathtub ring. And as part of that environmental assessment process, like Wendy presented on agriculture, all of us did our part in different aspects. I'm also president of the Peace Valley Landowners Association. So, and the landowners and the Peace Valley Environment Association and Treaty 8 First Nations and Y2Y, Yellowstone to Yukon, we all did a joint presentation to the panel, and we also did it to the regional district at the same time. An alternate vision for the Peace River Valley, what we could envision this valley being. Without a flood reserve, this valley's had a flood reserve on it since 1957 for this dam. And it was also for more dams, but they got removed. But so so almost 50 years of flood reserve at that time, and the impacts that had, and I think that was I think I enjoyed that the most, working together with those groups and the First Nations on developing basically a land use plan of sorts for the river valley, and and it was great, and it was a wonderful thing to work on. And of course, along with everything else that happened in the environmental assessment process, of course, it got blown out of the water. So and it shouldn't have. I think in the final report from the joint review panel, it was, they were not, their terms of reference were not to make a recommendation whether the project proceeded or not, but they just laid out the facts, and the facts, pretty much spoke for themselves. And it resulted in, I think, 18 or 20 significant harms that could not be mitigated in this project. And despite all of that, the federal government and the provincial government, and that was under Christy Clark at the time, and Stephen Harper at the time, on the same day in the fall of 2014, they issued the certificate for the project. And then shortly after that, Christy Clark made the decision to proceed with the project. And so that was at the same time the landowners and the First Nations launched our legal challenges to the project. Then at that time, we all launched judicial reviews, and we all got beat up in court, for a variety of reasons. But the courts are not very friendly to trying to save a valley versus big government and big industry, and that's just the way it is. It's no knock on our legal teams. We all had good legal teams, and I thought we did a good job. But and the end result of that, well, the West Morbely First Nations, of course, still have a legal challenge going, but it's a civil suit. It's going to take a long time, but I think they have a very strong case, and ultimately, I believe they're going to win. But whether that will be in time to stop the project, of course, is very questionable. But if nothing else, it's a very worthwhile case. I think it's a very important case that proceeds forward. If nothing else, it's going to right some wrongs, past wrongs, and maybe set a better course for the future for future destructive projects like this that should not happen, and will stop, hopefully, river valleys like this from being railroaded by governments and industry when they really don't have the right to do that. So anyway, construction started in 2015. A bunch of us went down to and camped in the river valley that winter. First Nations and a bunch of settlers and whatnot, cowboys and Indians, I guess. We all camped at the historic Rocky Mountain Fort, which is the oldest white not settler, but fur trading fort in all of mainland British Columbia, Rocky Mountain Fort, 1794. It was first contact. It was the point of first contact with First Nations and the fur trade in mainland British Columbia, and or in the peace part of BC anyway. And we held things up there for 62 days before BC Hydro got their injunction to get us removed, and there's still a slap suit or civil suit on 5 of us that were there. But it's essentially it's dead, but it's still there. I think they like to have a big stick over a few of us. So so that was that. So then moving forward to 2017, we had an election, and the NDP got in. We all know that, and you know, so we thought, wow, we're this is going to be good. So they put the project to the BC Utilities Commission for review. Right on. That's what it should have had a long time ago. BCUC did their review, did a really good job despite all the restrictions placed on them by government, and there again came out with a final report that should have killed the project, and Horgan still didn't do, you know, Horgan didn't do the right thing and made that fateful decision to proceed with it. So then now BC Hydro was lagging on their quarterly reports to the point of being about half a year behind getting their quarterly reports out. And we come to find out in July, July 31st, Friday before a long weekend, we found out that the dam's sinking in the mud, and they got real problems there. Everything's running over budget, and they don't know what to do about it. So here we are now. Horgan's appointed Peter Milburn, and supposed to come out with his report. I guess the new cabinet is getting sworn in tomorrow, so I imagine Horgan wanted them, all those faces in place before they make their new decision, pending the Milburn report on what the future of Site C is. So, you know, here we are, you know, hoping for the best. I would say maybe expecting the worst, but hoping for the best. And you know, what are we going to find out? I mean, I think it might very well be that this project is simply unbuildable. You know, that'd be the best case scenario, I guess, for stopping it. I guess the other alternative is that the fix will be so darn expensive that it's unpalatable for the taxpayers to carry on. But I mean, I think the cost of this is going to be unpalatable no matter what if you try to carry on. It's just that they're going to, you know, renew their budget in dribs and drabs, and we'll end up like Muskrat Falls if it continues. So that's that. You know, large hydro, and well, you know, maybe one thing I'll just jump into first before I finish is, you know, what is actually happening in the valley. It's just, you know, a lot of what was happening with this project until, you know, about the last, well, couple of years was mostly out of sight, out of mind to everybody, even to the landowners in the valley, because most of it was down in the valley where the dam is, where basically there's really no public access or viewpoints. The only viewpoint really to the project, the best viewpoint, is what we call Dam Protesters Point. And what it is a couple of little shacks that were donated to a bunch of us by Treaty 8. And we moved them to a point of land right over top of the project. And we joined them together and made a little viewing spot there. And so, but you have to go through private property to look at it and stuff. So it's not really available to the public, and you got to go through fields and stuff to get there. So Hydro's been able to keep this project pretty much under wraps and out of sight until the last couple of years. And this year, it's really ramping up what's happening in the project. I think work has started on every segment of Highway 29 realignment, which is so between Fort St. John and Hudson's Hope runs Highway 29 north, and 32 kilometers of that will be impacted by the reservoir. That, you know, way downstream there, that dam is going to flood the highway and or make it slough in or whatever the case may be. And so there's 4 bridges that are no longer going to be any good. And so, for instance, right here, like I'm looking west right now in my office, and the Peace River is off to my left, south, and Cache Creek comes in just straight in front of me from the north. And so the bridge, it's actually a fairly new bridge. That bridges Cache Creek on the existing Highway 29, and it, you know, that thing would be good for another 50, 60, 70 years. It's a really good bridge, but of course now that's all going to be flooded. So they got to build a 590 meter bridge to bridge this, what will essentially be arm of a reservoir. Like it won't be Cache Creek anymore. It'll just be like an inlet, I guess, or whatever you call it. And that's happening all through the valley, the Halfway River. They got to build a 1.1 kilometer long bridge. It'll be the longest bridge in all of northern British Columbia. Meanwhile, the Taylor Bridge on the Alaska Highway, the main thoroughway in northern BC, and for everybody right on up to Alaska, it's a 690 meter bridge. So almost what they got to put in here now at Cache Creek. And we can't get it replaced. It's desperately in need of replace. It's quite common to get held up in traffic there while they're doing repairs on the bridge. We can't get a new bridge on the Peace River on the Alaska Highway. And they got to build all this. I think when everything's said and done on Highway 29, this is going to be $1 billion highway. I would think. Just the Halfway River Bridge is $104 million. This one here is $80 million. These are all, keep in mind, these are all the lowest bids. Some of the bids were a lot higher. And the way these things always work, that's just the way it works. The lowest bid gets a job, and then they make their money on the extras because of all the problems that crop up that weren't allowed for. So, this very likely this will be $1 billion highway. What for? We got a perfectly good highway now, without Site C, and we don't need Site C. $1 billion highway, which is essentially just a mitigation measure, and that is actually mitigation. I've learned to really hate the word mitigation. It's like a bad word for it's like an omen of a project. A really bad project. The more you read through a project description and see all the mitigation measures that have to be done, and that's what's all laid out in the certificate for this project. I can't remember. There's like 70 or 80 mitigation measures, and well, most of them are not satisfactory. Will not work. Like I said, they identified that there's 18 or 20 significant harms that cannot even be mitigated, but they try anyway. I guess in this day and age, they got to try. So you end up with all these environmental efforts, try to mitigate impacts that are not going to be satisfactory. You're going to end up with a very much diminished biodiversity and everything else, you name it. But it just costs a lot of money. And that's why large hydro anymore just does not make any sense at all. And we're starting to see that worldwide more and more. Like Canada, we don't have to go worldwide. In Canada, every major large dam that's being built in Canada right now, the Kiosk, I think it's called the Kiosk in Manitoba, Muskrat Falls, and Site C, they're all enormously over budget and not done spending money yet. And that's just the way they are, and that's what's happening around the world. And of course, and that's before you look at any other impacts of a large hydro dam. What low elevation river valleys do for us is enormous. As an ecosystem service and a natural capital that is uniquely held in river valleys. That's what you lose when you flood river valleys. Anytime you hear about a clean energy, hydro project, it's flooding the most diverse piece of property in that location. And that's what we got to get away from. I look at large hydro as two aspects to it. All the environmental harms and impacts to people, First Nations, and all the biodiversity and all the impacts to wildlife, all of that, all the things that go in the environmental assessment process, and then strictly the financial end of it. Going through the BC Utilities Commission review, the landowners, we hired an energy expert from the Northwest United States out of Portland, Robert McCullough. He's arguably the top energy economist in the Northwest United States. And if you would have talked to Robert about 15 years ago, he would have been a proponent for large hydro. Well, maybe a little more than 15 years ago. But he's strictly an economic guy, a money guy. He doesn't, I mean, I'm not going to say he doesn't care about the environment, but that's not what he looks at. That's not, that's not his ballywhack. So going through the BCUC process, he looked at the economics of Site C and where it was at the time with the money that had been spent, all of that. He didn't look at the environmental stuff. He just looked at the economics. Did not make sense. In fact, almost it was surprising to himself how bad Site C was. And I might point out, when you hire somebody like a Robert McCullough, you don't micromanage what he's going to do. He does what he's going to do. And in fact, I was a little worried we might not be happy with what he did, but it turned out I didn't have to be worried about that, because Site C, I mean, it just sucks financially. And so a month and a half ago, we asked him again, I mean, on all these new problems, well, they've been around, I guess, for a year and a half. We just found out about them recently. When these problems surface here, we went to Robert McCullough again and said, well, now what? I mean, there's been a lot of money spent. What's the deal with Site C now? And so obviously he doesn't have all the figures and everything that, that BC Hydro and the government probably are sitting on, but based on what he could determine, not only does Site C still make sense to shut down, but we would save a lot of money. We would actually make money by killing Site C at this late stage, and just simply building the clean and green renewables as you need them. So the economics of large hydro just are not there anymore. So that should be the end of the story. And if that's not enough, just I would argue just the environmental impacts, that on its own should be enough to kill hydro. When you combine the two, it's crazy. So what can we do? Like moving forward, like I say, the government's going to make a call here, I guess, pretty soon. I would imagine it'll be a Friday afternoon, getting close to Christmas. So there's lots happening, and there's lots to, that people can do to watch. One thing I might note, tomorrow night, there's a webinar, the Narwhal's holding a webinar that's titled BC's Site C Dam. Where do we go from here? So that'll be a good one to watch. It might be full, because I know they were getting a lot of interest in that one too. So Dogwood, NGO, we were quite disappointed with Dogwood for a lot of years that they did not jump on the Site C issue. Now, Dogwood's done a lot of stuff, mostly based on fossil fuels, coal, stuff like that. But they have really jumped into the fight against Site C with both feet. They got a petition. I encourage people to just go online and sign that petition. They got some action going. Lead Now has a petition going that I believe is still active. People can sign that. There's different organizations that you can support. Well, for instance, down in the Vancouver area with Fight C, Rita Wong, the Roland Justice Bus, and of course, a number of other, the outfits have been long active on Site C. Sierra Club has been Y2Y, Wilderness Committee. Oh yeah, that's the trouble when you start listing organizations. Of course, I probably forgot one, didn't I? But then another thing we've been doing more and more recently, for years we've been fighting Site C, kind of stuck in our own silo here. Meanwhile, you have all groups just like us all over the place in Canada and worldwide fighting dams, and running into the same problems, doing the same mistake, whatever, but not talking to each other. So NAMRA, just, in the last year, we've kind of joined forces a little bit with NAMRA. We stay in touch with them, do Zoom calls with them. NAMRA stands for North American Mega Dam Resistance Alliance. I think that's what it is. If you just Google them, great outfit. And, and they're looking at, well, like their title says, North America wide. And so on the Canadian side and the American side of the border mainly. international rivers. Right now, they just launched a really good initiative. It's called Rivers for Recovery, a global call to protect rivers and rights as essential for a just and green recovery. You know, I mean, here we are in COVID and fighting climate change. If you read the wording of that initiative, it's just spot on. It's deadly, and they're looking for endorsements. You can sign it as an individual, or you can sign it as an organization. I know our organization has signed that already, and like PVEA and PVLA, they're you know, it just sounds spot on. Well, it depends how much is happening. We put out a mail out through MailChimp. It's called Site C Related Media, and it just keeps, you know, if you're interested in staying up on what's all happening with Site C or dams, large hydro dams, or energy alternatives in general, we can put you on the mailing list. Actually, if you go to the landowner's website, peacevalleyland.com, you can sign up right there where it says sign up form. And every once in a while we put a blog out from there. You can go on that too. And then so on a bigger picture, what are we fighting? Well, there's forces out there that are thinking that want large hydro to go ahead on a global and national stage. Climate Bonds Initiative. There was a push for large hydro to be given a green bond. I don't even understand this stuff, but that hasn't happened yet. A bunch, I think, like hundreds and hundreds of organizations signed a petition opposing that. You know, large hydro and green should never be mentioned in the same hemisphere. The International Hydropower Association, powerful lobby. They plan to develop a sustainable hydropower standard. They're just starting that. Well, I think they're just starting that now. And they're taking comments right now. You know, there again, that's just an attempt to greenwash more large hydro. You know, so yeah, people, if you get a chance, get on there and just slam them. And I think Wendy made reference there, you know, like Canada's so-called solution to climate change is, you know, and that's under this Trudeau government, is more large hydro. So there again, you know, wherever you can, you got to get the message to provincial and federal politicians that, you know, hydro is not building back better, and it's not a climate solution by no means. And, you know, the last hydro dam, should have been built by now. And I probably am running out of time, so I can stop there.
That's an excellent way to end. There's lots of questions, so I'm sure we'll hear from you again when we get to them. I think that with these projects, I mean, we've seen the same thing with the fracking projects, with the Coastal GasLink pipeline, or even with the tar sands themselves. Whenever we're out of the metro area, it is so much more difficult to motivate people to fight against these climate destroying projects. And having your voice from the Peace River Valley, which is right at your front door, literally, I think is very important and inspiring to hear about the fight back. Because we didn't want tonight just to be about, you know, this is an inevitable project, it's horrible, but the government keep pushing ahead. We wanted to be about all the fight back that's already happened and what more we can do. So it's, you know, it's really encouraging to hear that international connections are being made, because if there's anything that's come out that's built stronger resistance during this time of pandemic, part of it has been our push, and almost it's easier to connect internationally now because people are becoming so much more comfortable with this sort of online communication. So thank you very much. 2 more speakers left before we go to the Q&A. Just wanted to remind you, keep putting the questions in. We will get to as many as we can. The next speaker, Rita Wong. Many of you know her just from all the wonderful posts in the chat. Thank you, Rita, for the links. Rita Wong is a volunteer with Fight C, a grassroots group which seeks to protect the Peace Valley from being destroyed by the Site C Dam. For the past 5 years, she has been actively opposed to the Site C Dam and has written about her visits to Treaty 8 territory, the homelands of the Dunaza and Cree people in Rabble and the National Observer. She is a poet scholar whose work is guided by what water teaches us. She has written a number of books of poetry, co-edited the anthology Downstream, Reimagining Water with Dorothy Christian, and teaches at Emily Carr University of Art and Design. Rita has also spent time in the Alouette Correctional Center for Women due to her opposition to the TMX pipeline expansion. She is grateful to live on unceded Coast Salish lands and for the opportunity to learn to uphold Coast Salish laws and also to remind the BC government of its treaty responsibilities as well. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you for that introduction, Allison. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay. I just wanted to thank Kelly again for the Eagle song. It just really moved me because when I first went up to the piece back in 2015 in the summer, I just happened to be there when Hydro started cutting down trees for the dam. And I was up there for a decolonizing water bush camp. And I ended up just going to a river ceremony for the piece. And they were targeting the trees that had eagle's nests in them, right? They were deliberately trying to hurt the morale of the people up there. And it was really heartbreaking. And it still angers me. And so here we are 5 years later, and I'm going to share a picture if I can figure out how to do it. It was on Twitter a few weeks or months ago, and it's a huge 1,000-pound eagle's nest that they took down this year. So the eagles, like from start to end, every year I go back up there in the summer, and it is the eagles that remind me that we have a responsibility to not destroy their homelands and to, to absolutely be better relatives. So I'm going to see if I can find oh, it's not letting me, oh, here we go, maybe. Okay. Yeah, so if you're not following Arlene Boone on Twitter, I encourage you to do so. She posted this October 25th, and it's just an enormous, like that nest is bigger than all 5 or 6 people trying to take it down and move it. And, like Hydro's been doing a greenwash campaign, like Ken was saying, and I cannot stomach it. So I wanted to, first of all, acknowledge as a guest up to Treaty 8 and a guest here on Coast Salish territory that even if we are here, by various historical accidents, wherever we end up being, we have a responsibility to uphold the Indigenous laws of the places where we're living. So I was so heartened to hear you say not samat, Kelly. Like some of you know that I spent time in jail because of my opposition to the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. And it's funny, I was talking to a journalist and he was like, I always thought you would get arrested for Site C. Like, I thought that if you were spending time in jail, it'd be for that. And I was like, well, if I could figure out how to be effective, I would do it, no question. So I'm always open to a conversation about tactics, about strategy, and I'm glad we're having this conversation tonight because it has been so disheartening to see the NDP government betray not only its environmental base, but actually betray its own responsibility to Indigenous laws, its own responsibility to reconciliation, its own responsibility to upholding the treaty. So all of that is it's just unfathomable, right? So I wanted to share a couple of photos. I was up there this summer and, I really admire Ken and Arlene for what they do. They live in the middle of the sacrifice zone. Like they see the trucks coming, they see the logs going down, they see the clear cuts. It's just violence. It's so hard to live with day after day. And I just so much admire their perseverance and their steadiness in the face of all of that. And I wanted to say also before I forget that when we're talking about the geotechnical problems and the risks, this area that has had 2 major landslides since they tried to start building this dam, you know, all of this technology, former engineers of hydro like Vern Ruskin advising to not build the dam, you know, lots of knowledge. But the first peoples, the West Moberly First Nation and the Danazaa people, they submitted a report to BC Hydro back in 2012. And in that report, buried on page 363 of it, it's this huge long report. And the report, for those of you who are interested in finding out more, it's entitled Telling a Story of Change, the Danazaa Way. And when I think about the treaty responsibilities work both ways. Settlers and newcomers who come have a responsibility to uphold those treaties, and we are failing miserably. So, I mean, we really need to hold both parties of the treaty accountable. And that report basically points out that in the Danazaa tradition, there's a history of what they call dreamers. And the dreamers are able to receive information through their dreams, right? They prophesize things that are coming. And there's a Danazaa prophecy by multiple dreamers that holds that dams across the Peace River will fail. Charlie Yahi was the last dreamer or prophet. He said that that dam is not going to hold. He already dreamed that there was a hole underneath it, there was a sinkhole. They fixed that, but he said the dam will go. I'm just quoting from that report right now. A lot of dreamers, as well as Charlie Yahi, said, if you fool around with nature, nature will fight back. It's kind of scary, they say, because it feels like the dam could just malfunction and then a sudden flood, and that's what creeps me out. So this is something that the First Nations of the area know. This is something that is in their stories. And this is something that has been totally disregarded by BC Hydro, by the environmental assessment process, all of that, right? And it's not, you know, their ways are very humble. They'll tell you that, but they're not going to like slap you in the face and push you about it. And so it's up to us as settlers or unsettlers to do our research, right? And to also uphold the words of the people who are speaking up against this dam. And so just to realize that the geotechnical problems were foreseen by the First Nations first and foremost. They have been reconfirmed by various engineers, by all these reports, by independent investigations and FOI reports from Ben Parfit, Sarah Cox, like over and over again in different directions, we're getting this information. And it is absolutely irresponsible to continue destroying that valley for this reason. Like it is just a question of when that dam falls. You know, we don't know the timelines, but we know that that will happen. And so wasting billions more of money, more dollars on this is just absolutely irresponsible. We should be doing a pandemic pivot during COVID, and we should always be refusing this greenwashing. You know, the idea that hydro is a climate solution ignores the fact that climate solutions don't destroy the very places they need to protect. You know, that valley, as the other speakers have spoken so eloquently, is crucial. It's a key migration corridor, right? For moose and elk and deer and lots. It's like Y2Y's work. Check it out if you haven't already seen it. It's really important, not just to the people up north. And this is one of the things that was so horrifying to hear Horgan do in 2017. It was a chicken shit move, right? That to basically say, oh, we can sacrifice a few people up north for the rest of the province. Well, the problem is that it totally doesn't understand our interdependency. You know, we're in a climate crisis and we need to be protecting our forests. We need to be protecting our river sheds, and destroying them and making them less resilient is absolutely the wrong move right now. We don't have time to waste on this. And so, you know, to really be clear that in the lower mainland, we would never flood an area all the way from Vancouver to Whistler. We would not destroy it like that. And we shouldn't be doing that up north or anywhere at this point, right? So for people to understand the scale of the destruction, and maybe I will share my photo now. I apologize, it's gonna be painful to see this. But I think it's important to not turn away and to just be witnesses and to speak up against what's happening. So, oh no, where is it? I'm just looking for the file. If I don't find it, you can also find it online. It was an article by the National Observer back at the end of July this summer. And oh, but the photo that I wanted to show you was some of the cuts that have happened, and for whatever reason, it's not letting me. Oh, I've got an idea. I'll do it this way. Thanks for your patience as I figure this out. Take a deep breath. And I apologize if I'm angry, but there's a lot of reason to be angry. And there's also a lot of reason to direct our rage into productive venues. So lobby your MLAs, lobby your new cabinet ministers. Don't let them get away with this. Okay. I have to do this again. And then if I can't share, I'll give up, but I'll try one last thing to see if it'll work. Share screen. Oh, here we go. Okay. So, you know, I was really moved to see the video, and those islands that are in the river, this is what they look like, some of them, but there are many more, like Ken was saying, and there's still lots of old growth that can be protected and needs to be protected. But, you know, like from a distance, it may just, and it's particularly insulting that these look like so-called teepees, right? Like the way that this whole thing has played out has just been an insult and an injury to Indigenous peoples over and over again in so many different ways. It's just horrific. But the size of these clear cuts, like they're enormous, right? There are hundreds of them in the valley. And like, this is just one of that I was able to walk to. Many of them are hard to get to. They're on like islands and stuff. And so, you know, to emphasize the amount of the damage that's being done and to not turn away from it and to stop it so that we can start healing the land. As Ken says, and Ken and Arlene have taught me a lot about the resilience of the land up there. Every time I go up to visit, I learn so much. But the landslides, there've been 2 major landslides, one of which, this is really close to the dam site, right? This is a house that's no longer livable. Like if you go a little further out, there's, you know, yellow tape and everything. And, you know, that's an area that's increasingly being fracked, that's not stable, and that is a disaster waiting to happen. And so, you know, just to realize that we need to educate people. There's still, I talk to this about, I talk about this with lots of different people. And I'm still surprised by how many people sometimes still think that dams, mega dams are somehow clean or green, right? We're up against $1 billion PR machine, which is BC Hydro. But the reality of what's going on up there is just, it's just not green at all. And so the more we can get this out to people and put pressure on the new MLAs right now, absolutely, we need to be doing this. And this webinar is very timely in that regard. So I'm glad that we're going to have a conversation after this about action and what we can do. And I will close it there for now. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing the pictures of how it's changed. It's important that we recognize definitely that this project has gone along its way without the permission from people, including the West Moberly First Nation, but that also we can think back to what it was like. And Wendy was telling me before we started to reminding me that the land can go back to what it was. Mother Earth can recover. And someone asked a question earlier, you know, is it too late? And I think we can never consider that it's too late to stop this disastrous project, that we can't accept that as any sort of answer or response from anyone in the BC or federal government. So thank you, Rita, for being with us here tonight. Our final speaker of the panel before we get to the Q&A is Thomas Davies. Thomas is a founding member of Climate Convergence. He is also a unionized pipe fitter and a power engineer, and the author of System Change, Not Climate Change, from Battle of Ideas Press 2019 is when it came out. Thank you, Thomas.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yep, sounds great.
Awesome, thanks. Welcome to everybody who's participating in the webinar tonight. It was really exciting to see so many people from so many different places all across British Columbia participating tonight. I think that's something that is something we can definitely build on, that there's pockets of interest and resistance all across British Columbia for people who understand how devastating this project is and could be if completed. I'm not going to pretend I have the same amount of experience or knowledge that the speakers before me had on Site C, because I don't. I think we need to be really thankful and recognize the work that they've done for literally decades. And that this project very well could be a lot farther along the road or be built if it wasn't for the resistance of these people who aren't doing it, who aren't benefiting financially, who are doing it while, like Ken and Arlene, when they're losing their farm and their land, and they're seeing all this destruction around them, but they're still finding ways to keep fighting and to inspire the rest of us. So I think we need to acknowledge that, and I find that very encouraging. What I do think I can do is offer some observations as someone who's been doing climate justice organizing for quite some time in British Columbia, and also someone who pays a lot of attention to international events. And then finally is someone who works in construction, who has a lot of friends who either work on oil pipelines, and some of them who are actually involved in, not directly up on Site C, but even fabricating pipe that gets sent up to Site C, and conversations that I've had with them, and how I think we can do some kind of reaching out to people who are working on that project. I think the one thing that I'm really aware of after this last provincial election is that I don't think we're going to have the same kind of post-election hangover and possible demoralization that we saw a bit after the last provincial election, when a lot of people had a lot of faith in the BC NDP to stop the project. They had made a lot of promises. And ultimately, when they decided after sending the project to the review from the BC Utilities Commission, and it came back saying it was not economically viable, and they still went through with it, I think that was really disappointing, obviously, for a lot of people. I think people have a better assessment of what the possibilities and who's going to be able to stop the project this time around. So I don't think we're going to be sitting around waiting for this to be stopped. I think people understand that it needs to be through organization and mobilization, and that we aren't just waiting for the provincial government to do the job for us. And that's challenging because we're organizing during a global pandemic, but I really do believe that we don't have time to waste, and I don't think people are interested in wasting time right now. And I think the interest in this webinar is a good indication of that. Another advantage I think we really have is that the BC government is really trying to ram this dam through as quickly as possible. I think there's 5,000 workers up there right now, and they're trying to do it as quietly as possible as well. Wendy spoke and also about how BC Hydro's, or maybe it was Ken, about their quarterly reports being behind. But you don't see the BC provincial government out there promoting the benefits of the dam, talking about what a great project is. They aren't mobilizing public support for the dam the way, say, look at what the Alberta government is doing with the TMX pipeline. So that means I think there's opportunities for us to reach out to a public who hasn't been like overly convinced, who hasn't been like bombarded every day with messages saying why this project is a good idea, because they know it's not. And they don't want to take us on directly on any of the issues that they say the dam is a good idea for. They don't want to take us on the economic benefits. They don't want to take us on the environmental benefits. They don't want to take us on the Indigenous issues. So that gives us an opportunity. There's people, there's public, there's even people who don't know about the project, but people are not overly convinced that this is the best thing ever. That's something I think that we can use to our advantage. So we're living in a challenging time, but I think we just need to do everything we can to keep this issue in the public. And we saw how that it comes up during elections. And so anything we can do to keep this a discussion. Wendy's been doing great work getting editorials in newspapers and different groups, and anything that we can do to like just make a news issue, because we know that costs of the dam are going to keep going up. The environmental impacts will keep on growing. The energy alternatives are going to continue to improve. And the extent of the different government cover-ups and corruptions, I think, are going to come more and more to light. So the more we're able to keep the issue in the public eye, the more we're able to focus in and hammer away at our core messages, and the more we're creating opportunity for ourselves and seeing what can happen as far as the public response. I don't think we can control the public response. It's not something that we can say, if we do this, 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 and this, then of course people will react this way. But I think all of us who've been involved in organizing for climate justice or against different projects for different times notice that sometimes you're able to captivate public opinion. I think back to up on Burnaby Mountain when they were first doing the drilling to test what the land was like there, and the grassroots response and the hundreds of people that went up there and that were actually got arrested, none of us anticipated beforehand. It just grew and there was a spark. And so we need to give ourselves every opportunity to keep making those sparks, because we know that the issues we have are compelling. We just need to keep on pushing. So my overall message, I think we're going to be talking about in the discussion a bit more about concrete plans, and Ken was really good at talking about different organizations and different initiatives and petitions people can support. But whatever you can do about Site C, please do it, no matter how small or how big you think it is. And also prioritize supporting organized and coordinated efforts that can have a bigger impact. I think now is a time not to be demoralized. It's a time to keep on finding creative ways to do what we can, and keep on finding ways to struggle. That's my specific ideas on this project. I had a couple of videos that I wanted to share of Berta Caceres, who is a Indigenous Honduras activist who was assassinated for her opposition to a dam in her community. And I'll explain why I thought these two videos were important, but I wanted to share them as kind of part of a kind of overall perspective on what we're fighting against, and also who we're fighting with and what we're fighting for. So Allison, if you could put those videos up, I would much appreciate it.
Gracias. Buenas noches. Gracias a la familia Goldman. En nuestras cosmovisiones somos seres surgidos de la tierra, el agua y el maíz. De los ríos somos custodios ancestrales del pueblo lenca, resguardados además por los espíritus de las niñas, que nos enseñan que dar la vida de múltiples formas por la defensa de los ríos es dar la vida para el bien de la humanidad y de este planeta. El Copín, caminando con pueblos por su emancipación, ratifica el compromiso de seguir defendiendo el agua, los ríos y nuestros bienes comunes y de la naturaleza, así como nuestros derechos como pueblos. Despertemos, despertemos humanidad, ya no hay tiempo. Nuestras conciencias serán sacudidas por el hecho de estar solo contemplando la autodestrucción basada en la depredación capitalista, racista y patriarcal. El río Hualcarque nos ha llamado, así como los demás que están seriamente amenazados en todo el mundo. Debemos sacudir. La madre tierra militarizada, cercada, envenenada, donde se violan sistemáticamente derechos elementales, nos exige actuar. Construyamos entonces sociedades capaces de coexistir de manera justa, digna y por la vida. Juntémonos y sigamos con esperanza defendiendo y cuidando la sangre de la tierra y de sus espíritus. Dedico este premio a todas las rebeldías, a mi madre, al pueblo lenca, a Río Blanco, al Copín, a las y los mártires por la defensa de los bienes de la naturaleza. Muchas gracias.
Estoy destrozada de mi corazón con el asesinato de mi hija. La gran lucha era en defensa de las tierras, en defensa de los territorios, el reconocimiento de los indígenas como con todos los derechos que tenemos los hondureños. Era muy inteligente, muy valiente, y bueno, se ve cómo terminó en garras de una dictadura, de una indefensión que tenemos en este país. Que ya pare tanto asesinato y la entrega de esta patria a todas esas grandes consorcios a nivel del mundo. Eso es lo que yo le pido al pueblo, y te conste que esta lucha va a seguir incansable.
I believe it signifies life. I would go into the river and I could feel what the river was telling me. I knew it was going to be difficult, but I also knew we were going to triumph because the river told me so.
Yeah, I wanted to share those videos because what Berta has to say was better than anything any of us could say tonight. But it really gives a perspective on what we're fighting against, like I said, and who we're fighting with. And Berta played the ultimate price, but her community continues to fight. That specific dam project has not been able to go forward. And her daughter is one of the leading activists fighting in Honduras continually. Even though she saw what happened to her mother, the example and the perspective of her mother and the organization that they were able to build in Honduras has meant that her daughter thinks it's worthwhile to keep fighting. And that community is fighting even though that specific dam has been stopped because their perspective is wider than just one person. And because they know what they're fighting for and who they're fighting with. So even though it's a terrible thing that Berta Caceres is no longer with us, her example, I think, is really important for all of us. And that's what I wanted to kind of expand on, is that we're part of a global struggle. And that also the project that we're fighting against it's not over till it's over. I spent a short amount of time in the Standing Rock camp as a supporter and as a journalist, and watching the level of organization and resistance that reverberated around the world from literally the middle of nowhere in North Dakota, became such a focal point of struggle, and is something that still inspires and created a whole new kind of generation, or nurtured another generation of land defenders. That project, that was the last tie-in, that was the last boring they were having to do to complete the pipeline. But the people there thought it was important to fight. They did what they needed to do, and they ended up now not completely stopping the pipeline. It's been ordered to be drained, but even more so, they showed that it was vulnerable, and they showed what you can do when you're committed and you're organized. And as Berta Caceres said, we're fighting a system, I think, not just one dam. And we see them keep resurrecting these zombie projects, whether it be the Keystone XL pipeline or the Site C dam, which should not exist, which, given the natural course of events, given the logical, reasonable take on the situation, people would have forgotten them, moved on, moved forward. But they keep on resurrecting them for the benefit of a very small amount of people at the detriment of very few. So that perspective, I think, informs us that we can continue struggling and we can keep on fighting. And we know that we're fighting with millions around the world. And we know that our perspective includes a better world. And I think COVID-19 has really shown the weaknesses of the capitalist system that we live in. We've seen huge rises in inequality, again, like everything else, but even in a more grotesque way, we've seen a small minority taking advantage. And we've seen these governments unable to actually respond to the crisis in a real and sustainable way. The US stock markets, the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones Industrial Average, both had record days yesterday. And this is while hundreds of thousands of people are unemployed. This is while so many people's livelihood are completely in jeopardy, while COVID cases are skyrocketing, especially among the most vulnerable. And we see that contrast where the wealthiest are able to make the most, and those who are already the most vulnerable are being targeted and feeling the real brunt of this pandemic. And we see governments and a system completely unable to deal with it in a humane way. And I'm getting close to the end, but I just wanted to say, I was thinking while I was writing this, is that, like, we're trying to offer some sort of alternatives. We're opposed to this dam for a lot of good reasons. But what's a good example of how to respond to a crisis, how to respond and how to build something more sustainable? And I thought back to Cuba's response after the fall of the Soviet Union. And we don't have time because it's an 1.5-hour documentary, but David Suzuki made a documentary called The Accidental Revolution about what happened. And the summary of the film, which is available on the CBC website or on YouTube, goes like this. It says, since the collapse of the Soviet bloc in 1989, Cuba has revolutionized agriculture to produce more food on less land with very little environmental impact. With no fuel available to transport food, they've transformed traditional practices and brought farming into the cities. Many nations are now turning to this iconic island nation for guidance and making their own agricultural practices more sustainable. Despite the collapse of the Soviet Union, Cubans were able to maintain the backbone of their society, an elevated standard of social programs. The Cuban government believes universal access to education, healthcare, and are fundamental to their economic success. And so I encourage everybody to watch that movie, but it just hits me as such a good example where a small country which loses 90% of its trade overnight, which has been reliant completely on these high diesel fuel ways of production and farming, has to pivot, and pivots in a creative, innovative, organized, and humane way. And if that small country with that small amount of resources can do it, I am sure that these large countries like Canada, especially with all of our resources and all of our abilities, can do much better than we are. Definitely much better than the Site C Dam and flooding the Peace River Valley for electricity that isn't needed, that's violating Indigenous rights and costing taxpayers billions upon billions of dollars. So I just wanted to present that as a kind of a mind, to kind of set our mind frame that the way that we're living is not inevitable. Just as I feel the construction or the completion of the construction of the Site C Dam is not inevitable or the best that we can come up with as a society or as a province. Alison, I've got that one last short film from Martin Luther King Jr. If you could please play that. It's his speech acceptance for the Nobel Peace Prize. It's a short excerpt. You can watch the whole thing on YouTube, but I didn't think we'd have time. But I wanted to put this little small clip from there.
Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I accept the Nobel Prize for Peace at a moment when 22 million Negroes of the United States are engaged in a creative battle to end the long night of racial injustice. I accept this award on behalf of a civil rights movement which is moving with determination and a majestic scorn for risk and danger to establish a reign of freedom and a rule of justice. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I refuse to accept the cynical notion that nation after nation must spiral down a militaristic stairway into the hell of nuclear annihilation. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality.
So I just wanted to wrap up with that to give another perspective, even though it's not exactly on the front the same struggle that we're talking about. The perspective, I think, is very similar to what Berta was talking about. And we do not accept things that are against humanity, and we promise to fight against them with all our abilities. And both Martin Luther King Jr. and Berta Cáceres they accepted the awards, and they could have accepted the easy route and stayed in safe places and have been celebrated. They could have gone on speaking tours for the rest of their lives if they wanted to, but they chose to return home to the belly of the beasts and to continue their struggle. And that's something that I think really informs the way that I think we can approach the struggle against the Site C Dam. And there's a saying in Honduras that is spread around the world that says, both Berta didn't die, she multiplied. And I believe that we are part of that complicated equation to stop the Site C Dam and to build a better world. And I think both are possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I went and found my copy of your book when the video was playing. So again, I encourage people to get a copy of Thomas's books and all the other books that were mentioned here tonight and articles. This tonight has been about information, but I think we've also seen a very large view of what we're doing and why we're doing it. Thinking back to the eagle's nest that Rita showed us, all the way to people that have given their lives in the struggle for Mother Earth and for humanity. So yeah, we have a lot to discuss, and we're not going to be able to get to it all tonight, but people have also asked some really important questions in the Q&A. So I'm going to make 3 short announcements, and the panelists, if you want to go through the questions and kind of see where we're ending up with them. I have an idea where I want to start, specifically about LNG, but let's get that going. The first announcement I want to make is that 2 other people who were arrested for their actions against the TMX pipeline project, the Trans Mountain Expansion Project, Marta and Pia, are having their appeal hearing tomorrow. It's on Zoom. Those hearings are back on Zoom again. And so they're inviting people to come and defend freedom of expression and freedom to protest, and of course stand against the Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline. So in the chat, there's more information about how you can join that Zoom appeal court hearing. And we really encourage people who can to join in that important action, so that more of us can consider going out and but those who are able to get arrested, definitely it's important to know that the movement will be there to support you when you are. So let's keep up that support for anyone that has been arrested for standing against these projects. The next is a People's Assembly happening tomorrow, organized by Protect the Planet, Stop TMX. Climate Convergence is a part of this collection of people, group that's come together specifically to talk about stopping TMX expansion as construction begins here in the Lower Mainland, which is happening rapidly. So I encourage people, and Climate Convergence encourages people to attend that tomorrow at 7 p.m. PST is when that starts. And I just put the registration link for that in the chat as well. And as a final announcement, just that anyone that wants to keep up these discussions, please come to our next Climate Convergence meeting. We'll be planning future actions and webinars, and also have been throughout the pandemic doing a public education campaign with large posters that we will be continuing. So come plan with us and organize and continue the discussions that we will begin tonight. I'll put that information in the chat as well. So I'll go ahead and start with the first question. We are getting close to 9, so I will ask if the speakers are okay with staying till 9:15 at least. If anyone has to drop off, no pressure. You've all given us your time tonight, and we will continue these discussions. But the first question that I wanted to ask was someone would like to know about the connection between the Site C dam and the BC government's determination to proceed with LNG. Basically, as one of the reasons they're trying to justify Site C. Can anyone explain a bit more about that connection?
Well, I can jump in and say a few words on that.
Sure.
What we've seen, it started under the previous Liberal government, and the Horgan government has continued on that path, is the so-called electrification of the gas fields. So we're way out in all this hinterland, all far flung up in the North Country here, where there's the gas fields, mostly gas, some oil. Now we're subsidizing the electrification of that at great cost, running the power lines out there and then selling them power at cheap rates, because they're not going to pay the going rate, what power actually costs. So we're subsidizing the electrification of the gas fields, and they put a greenwash on that. They figured that justifies us doing LNG and selling more gas and stuff, by supposedly make it greener and less carbon intensive to produce it here. Very hypocritical, and it doesn't make any economic sense either there again. So there's that. And then of course, depends which LNG plant you're talking about. If any LNG plant that would use grid power to do the liquefying would use a staggering amount of power. it'd make the Bitcoin industry look green. So, and I think the only one they're actually building now, Canada LNG, that is not the case. They're going to use their feedstock, natural gas, to do the liquefying, but they're still going to use a lot of electricity. I mean, it's a big plant, and of course, there's all that pumping. So it still uses a lot of grid power. But I think the wood fiber one, I think they're talking about using grid power. Crazy. It's going to use a crazy amount of electricity from the grid. And, so if we went down that path of, like Christy wanted to do, is build, umpteen LNG plants and try to do, I mean, that is going to use a lot of grid power, irregardless how they do it. And yeah, then I guess we're going to need power coming out of the yin yang to do that. So that's that.
Anyone else on the panel like to comment on the same issue? So then we'll go, we will give Ken no breaks, but I think other people will be able to address this too. Ken, you spoke a bit about the unity between the West Moberly First Nations and the landowners in the Peace River. Can you talk about, is there any future kind of collaboration? How is that going? And maybe if someone also could update about the legal case of the West Moberly First Nation and kind of what has happened with that.
Well, yeah, there was a lot of collaboration, or and is. I mean, it's the landscape's changed a little bit because of where the legal proceedings were. Actually, Wendy knows very well the Stake in the Peace a fundraiser effort that was done. Now, and that was done when we were fundraising for West Moberly and Prophet River First Nations. They were together on their judicial challenge and on their attempt to get an injunction to stop work at that time. So the Yellow Stake fundraiser is a great fundraiser. $100, people bought a yellow stake. They're actually right in front of me outside here, about 20 yards. There's a whole row of them, all on the bank over atop of Cache Creek here. And so I think we raised almost $140,000 selling yellow stakes. So it was great. Now the landscape's changed a little bit. That fundraiser is not happening. Well, of course, Westmo didn't succeed in those legal challenges. Now it's into the civil case. And there's some discussion about possibly getting that fundraiser going again for their civil case, but that hasn't been finalized yet. So as of right now, that fundraiser is not going. And so, yeah, and right now that's really about all that's really been happening, other than, I do stay in touch with Roland Wilson, the chief, somewhat, and various members, and we're all on the same page and all trying to do the same thing here. But, we're out all at different places, and the landowners are in a big disarray now, with all being kicked off their properties or expropriated. And so it's pretty tough. It's a tough time right now for a lot of people.
Definitely. Does anyone else want to address anything about the West Moberly? Oh, we have the stakes coming up on screen. Thank you, Wendy. Did you want to say something as well, or just the nice picture?
No, it's not the best picture, but it's the one I could find the most quickly, and you can see them running all the way back in the back there. Yeah, 150,000, I think, almost, Kenny, just about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Including
it's great.
Corgan, Popham. I mean, who were all of the politicians that bought one? Anyway.
Yeah. You can still use those pictures against them. They've been used in very good ways. Keep it up. So someone else is wondering about when the Milburn report will be released. So that's the report that is now what Premier John Horgan is saying he'll make his decision or an announcement about. I don't believe we can know when it will be released, but I'm wondering if people could also address maybe what they think would be a good response to it, and how we could organize around such a report. I mean, I think there's been such a stack a mile high of paperwork showing how bad of an idea the Site C is. And we don't know what the Melbourne report will say, but I think it's more important what we do when it happens. So when it happens on a Friday before Christmas, as Kin surmised, which is the history of all these sort of announcements, you know, how do you think we could use it? Does anyone have any perspective on that report, or how it might contribute to the work that we're doing?
Well, I would just say we're skeptical. No one knows what their terms of reference, what their instructions, what were the government's instructions to Peter Milburn. All we know is he's investigating the problems that were identified in that quarterly report, which was, you know, they didn't show a lot of details on that either. So we don't know. I mean, the devil will be in the details, and we'll have to be ready for that. You know, and of course, the other thing is, will Horgan release the report, you know, when it becomes out, or is he gonna, will the NDP government make a decision on Site C without the public seeing the report? So there's some moving parts here that we just have to be ready for. You know, but, you know, I think the key is that, my God, like there's, you know, there's obviously some major problems there. And for him to bypass the BCUC and just appoint someone to investigate it, and we have no idea what his instructions are, you know, there's some red flags there, and we just got to watch out for that and be ready for that.
Thank you. I'm laughing because the next question is also specifically directed at you, Ken, and it's about what happens to the trees that are being logged. Others may also know, or have if anyone knows what's happening then after they log them.
Yeah.
Clear cut.
Well, yeah. So, well, forestry's gone through some real contortions here in the last couple of years. So when they started the project, supposedly they were processing both spruce and the poplar, like coniferous and deciduous trees, and they were going to the mills. But they didn't have the same guidelines on them as in normal forestry. Like in normal forestry, you can't waste any good wood. I mean, you know, I have logged before as part of my living, and if forestry came in and checked your brush piles and seen wood that should have been going to the mill, you pay for that. That does not happen on this project. So wherever it was suitable to them, they would harvest, you know, process and harvest it. Where it wasn't, they just pushed into brush piles. Then in the last couple of years, all the like the OSB plants and everything were shutting down in northern BC, so they had no place to send poplar and birch and the like. So all of that wood, plus of course the cottonwood trees, them giant cottonwood trees, 3-4 foot in diameter, they were all just getting pushed into brush piles. All of it, just all of that went into them giant brush piles. Rita showed some pictures of them. There is hundreds and hundreds. Actually, I think there's thousands of them. And they burn them. It's this winter in the valley down here with the inversions. It's been smokier than most fire seasons down in the valley here all winter because of the burning of brush piles. They get their own custom venting index. So a lot of times we'll get smoked out down here. We'll go on the government website, venting index, just anybody can do it. You go on their venting index, and it would show that it's not permissible to burn that day. We would complain to the Environment Assessment Office, and they would come back and say, yeah, hydro apparently has a custom venting index, and it's according to it, they can burn today. So they basically streamline anything and everything they want to do to make it work. Same as eagle's nest. Eagle nest removal. It is illegal under the Wildlife Act to do anything to a tree that has an eagle's nest at any time of the year. Under the Site C project, they got an amendment. They can destroy all the, well, and they will, and they are destroying all the eagle's nest trees in the valley. All they have to do supposedly is not do it while the birds are actively in the nest with young. But the rest of the year they can just cut them down. And normally they just cut them down and the nest just gets crashed on the ground. The one that was shown in that on social media, that was actually a deliberate photo op by BC Hydro, I think, and they normally pictures like that would never get out. They allowed that one to get out to make it look like they were trying to do something good, like they're going to reuse this nest somewhere. I don't know what they're even going to do with it. Sorry, I'm on a rant.
Ken, can you comment on the cost of helicopter logging up there too?
Yeah, so in inaccessible areas for logging equipment. So a lot of the South Bank is very steep and not very accessible. Some of the islands, the hand fallers go there by boat or whatever, and then they helicopter log it. And it runs about $4,000 an hour, and it's painful to watch. And so not only are they, and a lot of times all they do with that, even the good wood, they just slowly make a brush pile with the helicopter at $4,000 an hour, just so it can be burnt. And so the last few days here, they've been helicopters flying both downstream and upstream. And actually, it's interesting. They've been working in areas that they logged already. And I don't know, maybe they didn't clean them up good enough. So now all they're doing is going around and picking up little sticks with a tong, like on a long line, and throwing them on brush piles in an area that we thought was all done already. So it just goes on and on like that. You just see that kind of waste everywhere.
Yeah, and I think someone asked a really, it's been asked in public, a very important question about pipelines in particular. How is it that 100 reserves on any given day cannot have access to clean running water? We can't build those sort of water pipes, but Canada can somehow spend billions of dollars on oil pipelines. And just thinking about the insane amount of money that's being poured into this project and projected to be poured into this project, what else could it do? Especially at such a desperate time for a lot of people, I think is enraging. So I think we'll go ahead and kind of do a wrap up here, actually. I will say that there is a person that's a journalism student at Kwantlen Polytechnic University in Surrey, and they're interested in doing a story about the issue and would love to hear more. So their name is Abby Luciano. They are on the list. Or if you're okay with me connecting you to them, then I would be happy to do that. Just let me know any of the panelists. I think that would be well worth the time. Thank you, Abby. Sure. And then another question just about the influence of lobbyists. Mo Sahota, Bill Thielman, if anyone has any perspective on those characters. And the next is just to say that I think what people want to hear in the wrap up is what they can do. What, from your perspective, can people be doing right now and in the coming months to fight against this project? So I know that discussion won't end in a wrap up from each of you. And I would say the biggest thing is to keep talking and come to the Climate Convergence meeting, come and continue talking about this issue with everyone that you know. But beyond that, people are eager to hear your ideas as well. So we'll go ahead and start with Wendy, if you feel like you're ready, because you were the first speaker and that's how these things go.
Well, I think although we all get tired of social media, I think there's a lot of connections to be made on social media, and obviously writing op-eds and letters to the editor. I think that there can't be an MLA who claims they don't know about this, and I think that everybody should get on their newly elected member of the Legislative Assembly and ask them what they are going to do to make sure that report, when it comes out, is thoroughly vetted by the public and that we have a full disclosure and discussion. It clearly should be stopping now till that happens, but.
Thank you. Next, who was next? It was Ken. You're back on, Ken.
So Yeah, and actually, the interesting thing right now, I was thinking about that. During the environmental assessment process and during the BCUC process in 2017, you really saw those hired guns come out, Mo Sahodas, Bill Thielman, that kind of stuff. We're not seeing that now. And I've been watching for it and waiting for it. It's not happening. Like, no one is standing on a soapbox and defending this project now. Not very many people. You know, some of the, like our local MLAs are, but you know, they're just reading from the Liberal Party script, and they don't have much enthusiasm for it too. In fact, they avoid the topic. So everybody seems to know that this is a bad project now. And it seems like the only rationale people can offer at this point to continue is, well, we spent so much money. And you know, so that's a pretty poor argument, and it's not true. And I guess I think the key right now, like Wendy says, is, you know, I mean, yeah, we just need to keep the pressure on in whatever way you can, or that suits your style, or whatever you're comfortable with. You know, in whatever way that is, social media, writing letters to editors. You know, we just have to keep the pressure on and support these petitions and different groups that are fighting it right now. So, and just keep an eye on it, especially when this report comes out. You know, if, you know, the best case scenario for our side will be if the Peter Milburn report comes out, and there's a bit of a breather there between that and the government making a call, because, you know, I mean, we can all take a look at it and go from there. And that's when we got to watch out for the hired guns, because that's what happened with the BCUC process. The BCUC came out with their final report. Even the mainstream media was saying, well, that's it. Horgan has no alternative. He's going to have to kill this thing. And then that's when we seen, you know, Thielman and others came out. Jordan Bateman for the one of the unions, people like that, and even the deputy ministers. You know, that toxic letter from Laurie Wanamaker and you know, to the BCUC, trying to make them look like a bunch of idiots. You know, with their final report. So that's what we have to really, you know, I think we have to stay nimble on our feet and be ready to act accordingly. But yeah, and just keep the pressure on. Sorry, I'm going on and on.
All right, there's still lots of people on, so we're happy. No worries. Rita?
Well, I think I just put some links in the chat. Fight C is supporting a campaign in the next couple of days while Cabinet gets sworn in, to contact your MLA. I know that's not enough, but I think it is important to just keep going and not shut up. And also, I've put a link to Lindsey Brown's Twitter account. If you're on Twitter, follow her on Twitter. I think she posts a lot of really great information. The link I was trying to put up is it's a GIF of a dam bursting. And I think the more we kind of flood social media with images of dams bursting and just the danger factor of it, I think that that's a good thing to do. So that's something that can be kind of fun to do, even, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, to keep it up, and because, you know, there's still a lot of people who need to understand that dams are not green. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in just educating people still. And I would also say, I'm not sure about trying to change it so that the BCUC overviews the Site C dam again, because part of the problem has been that, you know, it's become this political football instead of being ruled by actual independent, you know, knowledge keepers. And that's the problem. So, you know, and to keep looking at what West Moberly is doing. I put some links earlier in the chat. They've got this amazing native plant nursery, the Twin Sisters Nursery, this caribou recovery program. And so lots of things that are happening on the ground up in the Peace Valley that are actually the paradigm shift that we need. And so we should be amplifying those things. And yeah, going up to visit in solidarity if we're capable of that. And if not, doing whatever we can on social media and online.
Thank you, Rita, and thank you for all of your participation in the chat and all the links and everything. We will send out an email with them for attendees and for people that couldn't make it tonight also. Thank you again. And Wendy, you had something to add? You're on mute.
Somebody asked for wording for that letter, and there's a resolution going before the National Farmers Union National Convention in the next few days that was passed by Region 8 in October, that I posted I tried to post the whereases, but it wouldn't take that long a post. So I just post the therefore be it resolved. And it has some wording that might be useful to people who are writing letters and want to know what sort of things they can pull out and demand that government do. So, and I would also, Sonia Furtenau and the Greens were wonderful on this issue. We have a couple of MLAs now, but it also would be good to call people like Sonia and let her know that you're behind her on this, because she's the leader of the party. And there were a lot of Greens who came close this time. And to the extent that she hears from people across the province, not just her constituents, that they really want to see her, leg it out on Site C. I think that's an important, strategically important thing to do. Also, Rafe Mayer, the last thing he wrote was the last chapter in my book, and he said, you can think all you want about how somebody's got visions when they go to Victoria, but they turn into basically just game players when they get there, and really it's about civil disobedience. And I'm prepared to lie down in front of heavy equipment on this, but it's so goddamn far away that it's hard to get up there and do it. But I think that we shouldn't rule that out.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Hello.
we can hear you, Kelly.
I'm grateful that everybody got to be out. I haven't been out in the cyber world forever. I'm thankful. I'm thankful for the knowledge sharing, the hardship sharing, the celebration sharing. In relation to the ones that passed on, the trees, the winged, the four-legged, the swimmers, all the life that passed on, the people that passed on during this battle for trying to create a semblance of justice for the river. I'm thinking of when you put Bertha on, another country, a couple of other countries approached the United Nations and made the world aware that the water as a spirit is a living being and has a right to life, and that umbilical cord of the rivers that go out to the streams and the ocean and all. I believe we could adopt that motion that was accepted by the United Nations and implement that here, because Canada and United States that are putting the dams up and premeditated to flood the people out where those dams were built. And the corruption of that in the 50s to now living the atrocities of that mandate that came out with NAWAPA in the early 30s and 40s, and now that we're seeing. I just think that it's crucial to bring out that motion that's adopted by United Nations, that the water is a life. It is a living being. It has a right to life, supporting all the life around, like the people, like those people that live up there in Moberly, and the CIA, just like the cowboys and Indians in the 70s and the Dakotas. We're doing that all again and again and again. And so I just want to emphasize the motion that the Southern brethren and sisters brought up in the Pacific Rim, that the river is a life and we should adopt that motion. I'd like to thank everybody for their light of life and continuing the revolution for the right to life of the rivers in BC. I said before Columbus for some, British Columbia for others. So the highest honor, healing our nations of united resistance to apathy. I thank you all, and thank all the participants with extremely exceptional questions on there, and a good time to chat and renew ourselves. And again, there's no losing. There's no losing in our languages. Like there's no words for losing the war in our language. And so then becomes the cleansing of the umbilical cord, the next step. So celebrate that we've grown a little bit together tonight, and that we're going to be cleaning that umbilical cord to support the water, that it is a life and a right to life. Haitchkasiyam, for the honor of all of your time, healing our nations of united resistance to apathy. The best to you all, and greater blessings. Thank you. Haitchkasiyam.
Thank you, Kelly. Thomas still has some closing remarks to make, so he has a hard act to follow. And then if there's anything further you want to say at the end, I'd love to invite you back up again. But go ahead, Thomas.
Okay, just really quickly, thank you to everybody, and yeah, thank you very much to Kelly for giving that perspective that I think everybody's nourished by. It's been a long night, and I just want people to remember that we're living in the middle of a global pandemic, and that requires isolation and separation as part of our safety and security. And so it's going to be frustrating, and we're going to feel isolated sometimes because we are. So we just need to understand that this is going to be another level of complexity, and it's something that we're going to have to deal with. But if we understand that that's the situation we're dealing with, then I think we'll be able to deal with it and make sure that we make extra effort to connect and to do things that we can, even though they might not be the things that we're used to. Maybe we'll be able to come up with some even more creative and effective solutions through this process. So we need to keep an open mind to that. I think that the next big opportunity is going to be whenever this report comes out. This was an appointed government former minister. I think we can, like Ken, we're pretty suspicious about what it's going to say, but it's an opportunity to be in the news, an opportunity to demand accountability, and an opportunity to agitate on all of the issues that we're talking about. So I think that's what in Climate Convergence we're going to be focusing towards, building towards, even though we're not exactly sure when it's going to come out. There was a question about what to do with the 5,000 workers working there. First, during this pandemic, they shouldn't be working. There was 14 new cases of COVID on site. They're in these trailer camps. They shouldn't be working. They should be supported not to be in dangerous situations and have the government throwing them into this construction project because they're trying to rush it to get done. And I think we need to point that out, and that's a kind of a point of interest, I think, and another way we can kind of make links is that this is definitely not in their interests. And if we need something else for construction workers to do, there are
houses for the homeless.
Exactly, and there's 17 drinking water advisories just in British Columbia alone for First Nations. Some of them are over 2 decades old of communities not being able to drink their drinking water. So if we need some people to go do some work, that's a very obvious place to start. And finally, there's so many, it's going to be hard, and we don't have all of the answers, but we have enough to work with, and we have enough people to work with to keep this going and try and make it effective as possible. So I just wanted to finish with gratitude for everybody who spoke and everybody who came with all their great questions tonight.
Thank you, Thomas. And there is really Wendy has something to say too. Go ahead.
Oh, no, that Ken mentioned that Norwell has a webinar tomorrow night. Well, you can still register for it because I just did. And so that would be a good thing for everybody to, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you. It's posted in the chat as well. Also keeping in mind, there is the TMX discussion too. That might overlap a bit, but everyone just take a look at both. I posted again an invitation to everyone to join our next organizing meeting. We have discussions and plan for future events. They're held on Zoom for now, and you can just email climateconvergence604@gmail.com to get the information to join in. I also want to say thank you to people that donated. Thomas put a donation link in the chat earlier because it does take not a whole lot of money, but some money to run these virtual meetings and to continue printing posters and creating large pieces of artwork. We send our best of luck to to Pia and to Marta in their trial tomorrow and their hearing. Again, I encourage people to attend and support that. And thank you, everyone. I think it's worrisome sometimes having discussions about the climate and about projects that are under construction that aren't successfully stopped yet, because you're worried that you'll walk away feeling depressed and not ready to take action and kind of hopeless. And I think that is not what happened tonight. It is very opposite what happened tonight. It's been incredible to hear everyone's sense of optimism and commitment. And we live in the reality of climate change, but we do not live in a world that we cannot change what is happening around us. So thank you to everyone that attended, to the over 180 people that joined us on Zoom, and many more on Facebook, and we will continue this struggle. Kelly, any final words to take us out for the night?
Healing our nations of united resistance to apathy, the only way to move, a movement. Haichkasiam in the honor of your time, and healing together and making movement together and positive and nowhere to go but up. And it's not up to the government to tell us what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and we're going to clean up the world the way government had messed it up, but they need help. And I'm grateful that people are humble enough to have open mind and open heart to clean up the mess that others did for profit. It's not right. Aichkasiam. Aichkasiam.
Good night, everyone. I just am fixing a link quickly. Someone posted that a link wasn't working, so I'm gonna fix it. But we are concluded for tonight. Thank you all very much for joining, and we will see you on the streets, on Zoom, everywhere we can, fighting for climate justice and against the Site C dam.
Okay. Thank you and good night.
Good night, everybody. Thanks.
Good night.
Rest well when you can.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Kelly. Rita's gone. Bye.
Good night, everybody.
We won't be the same.
Never again. We will win. Good night.
That's right.